want to show you how to make a delicious oven-dried tomatoes. This is a really neat recipe that will produce a very sweet, luscious little tomato that's used in a lot of different dishes like bruschetta, on pizza, just on crisp bread. You could use it in pasta, on sandwiches. And over in the Mediterranean, where tomatoes, in the southern France and all through Italy, where they have an abundance of delicious tomatoes, this technique is very common, including the Greek islands. And they'll take these and they'll cut them open and squeeze out the seeds and the pulp, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And they lay them out over screens in the sun, and with the nice breezes off the ocean and the tomatoes laying on a screen, they'll dry beautifully. Later they pack them in olive oil, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's get started here. Today I've got some organic plum tomatoes, and these are not super ripe, and that's fine. You don't need an overripe tomato. In fact, one that's a little underripe will work better. Very simple. What you need to do is just cut off the end. We'll do that on both of these. And then you want to cut them in half. And I'm using these plum tomatoes because they generally have a lot more flesh or meat than, say, like a Brandywine tomato that may have a lot more juice and seeds. It would take a lot longer to dry. But you can see in here that there's seeds and some of this other stuff that we want to get out. Simply take the tomato and just give it a little squeeze like that. You can even use a spoon and kind of dig in there and scrape out as much of the liquid as you can. That will help things go in the drying process. And you can see that it's almost all meat at this point, and that's a good thing. So we'll continue on here, giving it a squeeze. And remember, the stuff that comes out in the bowl is fabulous for your compost pile. We'll do 2 more. And it can be a little messy, and if you notice, I'm sort of aiming away from me because I don't want to get my nice new shirt covered with tomatoes. And at the end of the summer, or beginning of August, when tomatoes are really coming into season and are available everywhere, this is a great time to make this dish. So let me just give my hands a quick clean here, and I'll show you how to proceed. Right here I've got just a simple little sheet pan, and as you can see, I put several layers of tin foil. This is going to aid later in the cleanup. So very simple. All we do is take these tomatoes and lay them out. There's 2 schools of thought. You can lay them down, cut side down, or up. I prefer to let them lay up. That way we can get some extra virgin olive oil and some seasonings, and I'll show you that in a minute. So we have these on our plate. You want to do your best to keep them from touching each other. And you're going to see later when I take them out of the oven, they're going to shrink way down. All right, now that we have them on there, I'm going to use several different seasonings. Here is just a garlic pepper seasoning. You could typically buy this in a store. If you don't have it, it's not really going to affect the dish all that much, so don't panic. You could also use just sliced fresh garlic as well. So we will just add just a teeny bit of this seasoning. And then here I have herbes de Provence, which is a combination of certain spices, lavender and others, and we'll take this and give it a sprinkle. Again, if you don't have this, you'll do fine just with salt and pepper and maybe some fresh thyme. And here is fresh thyme. This comes right out of my garden. What we're going to do is throw stems and all right on top of tomatoes. And the object here is, as this is drying in the oven, we'll talk about the oven in a minute, the flavor from the thyme will get into the tomatoes and it becomes a very sexy dish. So now salt. And here I'm just using a coarse sea salt. And this also is a critical piece to the recipe because the salt will help the moisture release from the tomatoes and it will dry slowly in the oven. And now I'm also going to add just a little extra black pepper and extra virgin olive oil, and you don't want to use a cheap oil here, the best you can afford. And be generous with the oil, trying to pour it down into the cavity of these tomatoes. All right, now these are all ready to go. What we're going to do is tuck them in our oven 200 degrees, and I'm going to check them after about 2.5 hours. Now be very careful with your oven. It may take a little longer, it may take less. The object is for it to go nice and slow. So 2.5 to 3 hours depending upon your oven. So in the oven they go. Okay, I've removed our tomatoes from the oven, and I'll be very honest, they've taken me a little longer than 2 hours. They were extra juicy tomatoes. So when you dry your own, this is something where it's very hard for me to give you an exact time because I'm not sure how big your tomatoes were or how juicy. You just need to watch it, and what's key, whether it takes 2 hours or 5, is that your oven is low, no more than 200 degrees, and when they're done, they will look just like this, and the texture is almost leathery. You'll see wrinkles on the back side of the tomatoes, and they will have shrunk by at least, I would say, 50%. So these are really incredibly flavorful now because, like I said, we've removed most of the water, so you really concentrate that deep, rich, sweet tomato flavor. Now a storage tip for these is take a clean mason jar, and I would pop them in like this, trying to get as much of the beautiful oil that's on them as possible, and fill up maybe one layer like that. Now we'll take some fresh thyme. We've already dried them with thyme on top. We'll take some fresh thyme, stalks and all, throw that right on top, and then continue stacking them in this jar. And this is the way that they would do it, you know, over in the Mediterranean region. They may use a different size jar or different tomatoes, but the technique is very similar. And you want to press these down a bit. We'll get all of them in there, and then I'll show you, whoops, stay off of there. We'll put the remaining fresh thyme on top. And now we're going to kind of push down and take our very good quality extra virgin olive oil. And these tomatoes, by the way, are at room temperature. You do not want to put these into the refrigerator still warm because that would make them spoil. So push down, and what you're doing is you're removing air pockets. As you push down, any air that's in the jar is forced to the top. So you'll squish them down like this, and you want them completely submerged with your extra virgin olive oil. And I promise you, this is a fabulous way to use up an abundance of tomatoes. So give this a try today, and I think you're going to love it. Thanks so much for joining me.
Dried tomatoes prepared like this are not shelf stable. They can be kept refrigerated for up to 2 weeks or frozen for up to 3 months. After removing from refrigerator or freezer, let them come to room temperature before using. The Harvest Eating community celebrates the benefits of a healthy eating lifestyle through seasonal, organic, and local foods. To view more of Chef Snow's recipe videos and to experience the Harvest Eating lifestyle, visit harvesteating.com. Harvest Eating, 4 seasons, 1 lifestyle.